Are you pleased with what the Prime Minister has said, and do you think it goes far enough?
Well, first of all, Andrew, thank you for having me on. And look, I'm pleased in the sense of we're encouraged by the fact that we're going to declare Rwanda a safe country. I think that's the right thing to do. Something actually Boris Johnson himself was arguing for, when we were bringing this through the House. But I don't think we can wait for the ECHR to intervene. I think, as we've put out as a new Conservatives organisation, alongside our great co-chairs, Danny Kruger and Miriam Cates, that we must act and strike now. Not only do we need to disapply the Human Rights Act, but we also need to introduce notwithstanding on the ECHR and the Refugee Convention, which has ultimately acted, as we've heard from the Supreme Court themselves, a blocker to us being able to take full control of our borders and to be able to act parliamentary sovereignty, which is enabling us to stop the boats and get people to Rwanda.
So that would put us outside all the international treaties and all our traditional laws on refugees and migrants. Are you happy for us to be there?
I am indeed, because actually, let's be honest, when this Refugee Convention was written, it was a very different world in the 1950s to what it is now, where we see mass movement of people across the continent, particularly coming to the West. We've seen what's happened in Italy and Greece, for example. I think the fact that even Germany and other European countries are looking to the UK as a global leader in this Rwanda offshoring agreement shows exactly the mood across Europe as a whole, which is that we need to do more. America itself having the very challenges on its southern borders as well. So, yes, we need to do everything that we can. We were very serious when we said stop the boats. The people of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork voted 73% to leave the European Union in 2016, as they elected for the first time ever in 2019 a Conservative Member of Parliament, because they wanted us to make sure that we enacted the very things that they voted for in that Brexit referendum. And taking back control of our laws and our borders was a very serious thing. We cannot have a foreign court in Strasbourg dictating to us here what we can and can't do.
Can you explain to me why it was that the Prime Minister fell out with Suella Braverman over policies which he is now following? I mean, this is more or less what Suella Braverman asked him to do in that famous resignation letter, isn't it?
Well, I'd be clear, Andrew, that we've heard rhetoric tonight from the Prime Minister, and as I say, it's encouraging, but of course the devil is going to be in the detail here, and the Prime Minister hasn't said that he's going to bring forward legislation to withdraw from the ECHR or to disapply its rulings alongside the Refugee Convention. So I'll be looking forward to actually seeing that legislation come forward, because we only have a matter of weeks to bring it forward if we want to get it through both houses of Parliament in order to then deliver that important Stop the Boats pledge. Because if we don't do that, the Conservative Party will reap what it sowed at the next election.
Danny Kruger, who you just mentioned, called this an existential threat to the Conservative Party if you don't leave the ECHR. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think Danny was actually talking about the ruling of the Supreme Court, but he is correct in saying there is an existential threat if we don't actually deliver on this policy, because we made that important promise to the British people that we would stop an issue that we know is one of the top 5 priorities for every constituency across the nation. It's certainly one of the top 3 priorities when I've seen polling on my own constituency done as well. So Danny and Miriam, who are doing excellent job as co-chairs, as I say, of the New Conservative, which I'm proud to have co-founded with them, we're trying to make sure the Prime Minister knows that he's got the people ready to have his back, is willing, as long as he's willing to go as far as is necessary to actually deliver on this important promise.
And Jonathan, if the Prime Minister comes back and says, do you know what, I am not going to leave the ECHR, you can forget that one, is that a confidence issue as far as you're concerned?
The Prime Minister should lead us into the next election. But of course, as I said before, we will end up seeing the result of that confidence in the public, I think, tested to such an extent that we will face the consequences at the ballot box. So if we don't deliver on stopping the boats, I certainly know that my job will very much be on the line, if not receiving my P45.
And do you think, given what you've heard tonight, finally, that we are going to see planes leaving for Rwanda before the general election?
I think people are right to be sceptical of this at the end of the day. They've heard a lot of rhetoric for a long period of time. But what I will say is that the Prime Minister, by declaring Rwanda a safe country in law, by turning this into a treaty, which will hopefully help with the Supreme Court, and as I say, bringing forward a notwithstanding bill to make sure we disapply international treaties and conventions, as well as the Human Rights Act, from interfering when it comes to delivery of policy on asylum and migration, I think will enable us to get to flight. But it is going to be very tight. I make no doubts about that.
I think that the Vice Chairman of the party, Lee Anderson, is also a member of the New Conservatives. He has suggested simply ignoring the law and sending the flights anyway. What do you think about that?
Well, I understand Lee's frustrations. Lee and I have been talking about this issue before it was popular, to be perfectly frank, back in 2020 when numbers were very low. And I get that he is annoyed about the situation, but I do actually believe that we should be respecting the rule of law, respecting the Supreme Court. Whilst I don't like their decision today, they have every right to make it. And it's up to us now as politicians, as the legislature, to come up with the solutions. And that's what the New Conservatives have done time and again with policies that we've announced in our migration paper, 12-point plan to bring down legal migration as well, which the former Home Secretary was correct to say is something that is too high and people want to see resolved. But we've also now outlined very clearly as a group as well with Neil O'Brien, who's just joined us as well, a very able former minister, one that I would say the best talents in the Conservative Party, who asked the Prime Minister's question today, saying exactly what we're calling for, to a notwithstanding bill in order to disapply international treaties and conventions that are blocking us from taking control of our borders.
What is the difference between new Conservatives and old Conservatives?
The New Conservatives, I'm grateful, Andrew, for the opportunity. The New Conservatives is actually looking at that political realignment that took place after the Brexit referendum. We're 2017 and 2019 elected members of Parliament who firmly believe that without the manifesto of 2019, which was about bringing the blue wall, traditional Tory shires, and our great industrial towns and cities in the red wall, together with a set of policies and views that chime with the public. That means being tough on law and order, having control of our borders, but also making sure that we invest in our communities to really deliver on that levelling up agenda.
So a bit Brexity, a bit Borisy, and certainly not one nation.
I'm sure there's an element of one nation, because at the end of the day, we are a Conservative Party. We're a broad church, but we're all vaguely of the same thoughts, with just the odd difference here and there. But yes, I would suggest that the one nation probably wouldn't want us to include myself anyway in their little group. So I'm happy to be left out.
And if withdrawal from the ECHR is not on the agenda anytime soon, will you be putting down legislation or proposals in the House of Commons to force the issue?
Well, look, we'll have a private members' ballot coming up. I've entered that. I can't promise I'll be drawn, but if I am drawn successfully, then I will use my private members' ballot to withdraw us from this, to introduce that notwithstanding bill. Of course, we'll have, as I say, the legislation coming forward. That's an opportunity for us to put forward amendments as well regarding a notwithstanding clause in there. So, we'll be busy at work waiting for the Prime Minister. And as I say, ready to work with him to deliver on this. He did work with Danny and myself when it came to the Illegal Migration Act, bringing forward or accepting our amendment to disapply Rule 39 orders from the ECHR when it came to trying to get people off the ground. But of course, as I say, we're ready to do whatever we need to do in order to make sure we deliver on this important priority.
Jonathan Gullis, thanks very much for speaking to LBC tonight. It's appreciated. Let's turn now to our political editor, Natasha Clark, who was at that press conference earlier on, and quite a dramatic one it was too, wasn't it, Natasha?
It was, but I think, to be honest, it left me with more questions than answers.
So let's go to the questions. What do we not know about these set of proposals from the Prime Minister?
Well, what we don't know is exactly what will be in this emergency legislation that the Prime Minister has promised, and exactly when it's going to come forward. He did say that it will designate Rwanda to be a safe country, so I think we've got that down, but we did not hear from him exactly how he intends to override other foreign courts. This is something that Prime Ministers have long promised, the country, but we just have no idea how exactly that will come forward. Also, a question that I've got tonight, which we didn't get a chance to ask the Prime Minister, is how much money will we pay Rwanda for this new treaty? Rishi Sunak has promised, which I told you yesterday on the programme, that he was looking at a new treaty.
You did? It was a scoop or a scoopette.
Exactly.
Yes.
And now we know that he is looking exactly at it, but we don't know what it's going to look like. He says he's been working on it for months. And today, officials at the Home Office could not deny the fact that they are looking at paying Rwanda yet more money for this. We've already paid them £140 million. How much more are we going to pay them for a deal which might not see any flights go before the election? And
Natasha, can you throw any light on this problem that I've got? I just don't see how MPs sitting in the centre of London can, as it were, sort out Rwanda's, human rights and other problems that the court was so worried about. I mean, we can say what we like about them, but it's their country. Yeah, absolutely. I think looking at the judgment earlier today from the Supreme Court, it was very clear that just because we designate Rwanda a safe country, it does not mean that Rwanda has no problems left. They were really clear that the courts, that the judiciary system that Rwanda has got, that the capacity for them to process the numbers of asylum seekers that we've got in our country
is just not there. And they just do not trust that it couldn't be open to political corruption, that people there could influence the decisions in some way. There's lots of holes, and James cleverly tried to address this earlier in the Commons, but I don't quite see how they're going to be able to do that before the next election. It's going to take a long time to do that.
Yeah, and you mentioned James cleverly there. It was pretty clear at about 1:30 in the House of Commons that he thought we were certainly not going to leave the ECHR, and the whole thing was a complete delusion. And then a couple of hours later, the Prime Minister was broadly hinting that we were going to do just that. The new Home Secretary and the Prime Minister clearly have not got their ducks in a row on this, have they?
I think the Prime Minister wants to leave that door open. He clearly obviously understands the anger and frustration on the right wing of his party, and there are lots of MPs, including Jonathan Gullis, which you just heard there, who are pressing him to go further. Even tonight, they've heard from the Prime Minister, they've heard his statement, and still they say that they want to see him go further. They're not happy with the direction of travel in terms of how far it's going. They want to see him be much tougher, and they want to see him do that quickly, because like Jonathan Gullis realises, his seat is at risk. There are many other Conservative MPs on the backbenches who will lose their seat if the government does not deliver on that promise to stop the boats.
So they want him to nail this stuff down. Enough ambiguity, enough leaving doors open. Tell us exactly what you're going to do.
Exactly, and I think tonight there are a lot of questions about exactly what that means, when it will come forward, how it will disapply these foreign court rulings, which again and again we've been told by previous Prime Ministers. Rishi was very firm this evening. I will not allow Britain to be pushed around by any foreign courts who tell us what to do. But what we do not know is how on earth he will do that.